The following is an exclusive presentation of Optimum. We're your TV, phone, and internet company.
Stamford, a jewel on Long Island Sound, is Connecticut's fourth largest city and growing. Home to multiple Fortune 500 companies, the city has a long history of being business-friendly while maintaining a hometown charm. Challenges facing the city include an increased multicultural population, transportation needs, education costs, and more. Today, Meet the Leaders is coming to you from Stamford High School, where students will ask questions of state leaders and discuss the impact of legislative decisions. All that is coming up next.
And welcome to Meet the Leaders. Hi there, I'm David Smith, and as you can tell, we are not in our normal haunts, nor yet are we in Hartford. We are in a very special location, as you've just heard, at Stamford High School. We're pleased to be here because we are amidst some of the great minds of Stamford, some seniors, juniors, and others who are here visiting as we welcome three of the legislators of the Stamford area to the program for this very special Meet the Leaders program. So without too much further ado, let me introduce you to Senator Carlo Leone, who represents the 27th District of Stamford and Darien. Next to him is Senator Scott Frantz, who represents the 36th District, that's Greenwich and New Canaan and Stamford, and Representative Jerry Fox of the 146th District, representing Stamford. Gentlemen, it's great to have you here. Welcome to the program.
Great to be here.
And we appreciate you taking some time out to visit with these great young people that are visiting with us today, or are our hosts effectively here at Stamford High School. But we know that you've got a lot of work coming up all too rapidly. In another month, you will be back in action up in Hartford, doing that commute, which I know you've known to grow and love. And put in a lot of hours to serve all the people of this area and indeed the state of Connecticut. So thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
The legislative process is something that I'm not sure how much is covered in the various courses that these young people here at Stamford High School take, but maybe you can give us a little purview on how it works. Say in the Senate, how does a bill, how does an idea get going to fruition? And maybe you and Senator Frantz can double team that.
Sure. Well, basically, legislative process up at the state capitol, we have two chambers. We have the lower house, which is the House of Representatives.
Focus on the Senate because we've got that representative over here.
I will
to jump into the House question.
do that. And we're up in the Senate, Scott and myself, and basically an idea comes up either from ourselves or from the community, a constituent. Someone from the audience could give us a great idea that someone thinks might or should be law. And we then propose that either individually or through the committee process, and then that idea gets flushed out through public hearings and research to see the merits, the pros and cons of that idea, to see if it's worthy of voting to move it along through various committees and eventually to the Senate floor. We would then vote on it. If it passes, then it would go to the other chamber for the same process and eventually to the governor's office for signature.
Okay, we should say that Senator Leone is a Democrat, and next to him is a Republican, Scott Frantz.
But we like each other.
You know what? There have been relatively few fistfights on the program so far, and I think that's probably a good thing. But it is clearly a different ball of wax for you, Senator Frantz, being in the minority in the Senate. And how does it feel to be proposing things? Frequently they get passed, but there can be some subtle irritation between the parties.
There can be, and in fact, that will come out sometimes in the earlier part of the process when these ideas get floated before the committee chairs and the committee itself, and then it'll go through the process of being deliberated and perhaps voted on at the committee level, then make it to the floor of the Senate, which is where we have some real epic battles. And it sounds like it's kind of nasty. It's more a matter of principle, and it's kind of an intellectual exercise to go through many of these different floor debates, as opposed to feeling real anger against your opponent, person across the aisle.
That's right.
It's not unusual to have a just epic floor battle, and then someone come running around the circle. It's a big circle of 36 senators sitting in the Senate chamber, and someone would come running around and shake the other person's hand and smile at them and say, "Great job on the debate."
That's the way we like to hear it. Doesn't often happen that way in Washington, but fortunately in Hartford's a different ball of wax entirely.
True.
Meanwhile, over in the House, you get handed off bills from the Senate often.
And oftentimes we hand bills off
And
to the Senate.
goes the other way, too.
The House is made up of 151 members, all representing districts throughout the state. And the Senate is made up of 36 members, so they have larger districts. But it can work either way. I mean, a House bill can then get through the House and then go to the Senate. Senate bill would have to come down to the House. It does have to pass through both chambers, just like it does in Washington, and which is some of the gridlock you see right now because it can't get through both chambers.
Right.
And then the governor, just like the president, would have to sign off on it. And what Senator Frantz said is correct. I mean, we have to, you can definitely have disagreements, but you really can't let them carry over because before you know it, you got to move on to the next thing, and at the next thing, your opponent on one bill might be an ally on the next bill, and you just have to focus on the issue and try and look at it that way.
So it goes through committee the same way and so forth, and a vote for the House, and then gets shipped over to the Senate if it originates in the House.
Yeah, and we have joint committees. So what that means is that the committees are made up of senators and House members. And then when they get, like I'm the House chair for Judiciary. So if a bill is proposed to the Judiciary Committee, my co-chair and I will decide whether it's a Senate bill or a House bill, and then we have to vote on it, together. And then that bill would then move on to the Senate or the House.
And I should say that usually everybody comes together, both Republicans and Democrats, on most bills along the way. Yes. You have an amazing record of coming together on things. Budgets are another story, but many other bills you get a lot of unanimity on, do you not?
Oh, absolutely. I think the state of Connecticut in general, we work very well together because the goal is to really get jobs done, promote good legislation, defeat bad legislation, and make sure that we're moving the state forward. And if we didn't do that, then what you would see was the gridlock that we've seen in Washington. We don't want to be that way, and so far our track record has been pretty well along those lines.
Well, one of the areas that these folks and everybody in the state of Connecticut should be concerned about is bills on texting and driving. That's been a relatively recent phenomenon that has caused more than its share of heartache and misinformation along the way. Are there thoughts of new bills having to do with that, more severe? Do you want to start with that, Jerry?
Well, I think the three of us all serve on transportation, which is a committee that would initiate those bills. And we've looked, for a long time it was debated the whole use of cell phones and whether or not you could use cell phones while driving and handhelds versus non-handheld devices. And then what has become abundantly clear is that does extend to texting and driving, and with the fact that just about everybody now has a cell phone and everybody has the ability to text. And we have looked at that and looked to enhance the penalties on those just to make it clear that it's dangerous to do those things.
If there's one thing I'd like to leave all of you with today, it's don't let your friends text or even talk on the phone when they're driving, and certainly don't do it yourself. We spend a lot of time on the road going to Hartford, so we get to see every bit of bad driving that exists out there on the Connecticut highways, and it is bad. I'll never forget coming home at 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning once, and this car's going back and forth in the middle lane. The guy's sitting there with the Wall Street Journal draped over his steering wheel while he's talking on the phone and holding on to a cup of whatever it was and driving with his knee. And I honked my horn, and he was like, what's the problem? I followed cars that have gone off the road 3 times in a row on the Merritt Parkway at 55, 60 miles an hour because the person was up there texting away or dialing. I don't know what he or she was doing. It's a horrible, horrible, someone was killed right up the road here. I'm sure you remember this about a year and a half ago. A jogger was hit by someone who was texting in their car. The fines are $150 going to $300 for the second violation. A lot of people say it should be much stiffer. The problem there is that if it's too stiff, then the police officers who are going to enforce those laws are reticent to hand out a ticket to someone who clearly is going to have a tough time paying $300 or $450 for the third offense, so they don't hand them out. So there's a balance in there somewhere, and we're working on it.
Well, to that end, I mean, the police, both local and state, have such a lot on their plates to begin with these violations of using a cell phone or texting or whatever, unless there's an accident involved, are very hard to prove or to really get involved in because they've got so many other things going on, Senator.
Well, they can pull you over for numerous instances that you might be doing something wrong, and then they would aggregate the problem if they'd seen you. They wouldn't pull you over specifically for that unless they're doing a push to put a spotlight on it, sort of to give more awareness. But you know, the texting and driving and cell phones in general is a perfect example of technology exceeding the laws of the land, in the sense that technology moves so quickly. We are always playing catch up on how to decipher and how to implement the correct legislation for whatever the issue is at hand. And what you're seeing is us trying to advance an agenda to allow the use of cell phones, but in a responsible manner. And so again, we don't want to be too excessive in terms of the fines because it's a reality of everyday life. But at the same time, we don't want to make it carte blanche that you can do anything you want.
Now, we know that nobody here texts or anything like that on their driving, but the word to the wise here hopefully will be effective as you pass information along to friends. We have a lot of questioners for you all here today, and we appreciate your opening yourselves to the questions from our audience. And if you would, as our first questioner, if you would identify yourself, your class, and pose your question, we'd appreciate it.
My name is Jennifer Krupa, and I'm a sophomore.
Hi, Jennifer.
My question is, what motivated you to become involved in government?
Senator Frantz, let's start with you since we've started at both ends before.
Fair enough. Great question, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer.
And thank you for having the courage to come up and ask that question. The reason that I became involved is that it's, in my judgment, a high form of public service. I think we all, as Americans, as residents of this wonderful state of Connecticut, we, at some point in our lives, need to give back because we were given so much as we were growing up, not only by our parents, but our communities, our schools, our churches, et cetera, synagogues and all that. They've given us so much. And so I've always had this passion for giving back. Prior to running for public office, I was very involved with economic development at the state level, and then Bradley International Airport for about 7 or 8 years, and the Connecticut Development Authority for about 15 years. And was, in fact, trying to avoid public office because it's very, very time consuming. I didn't feel there was going to be much of a balance in my life. But at one point, I did take a look at the fiscal numbers of the state of Connecticut, and I recognized how bad they looked and how Connecticut had gone from #1 in so many categories to mediocre to the worst in some categories. And I felt if I don't do something about this, then I can never complain about the state of Connecticut and the direction it's going in. Then an opening occurred. My predecessor, Senator Bill Nickerson, decided to retire 5.5 years ago, and that's when the opportunity to run for this came open, and I did so. So it's public service at the end of the day. It's us trying to make a better situation for all of you and your kids when that comes to be.
Representative Fox, how about you?
Sure.
I've always been aware of public service. I grew up in a family that was very committed to being involved in local activities, whether it be politics, whether it be community, various community offices. And so I started off by going to the local Board of Representatives. So I was a member of Stamford's Board of Reps. I then from there moved on to the Board of Finance, which had other issues. It was a citywide position here in Stamford. And then I got into the state legislature, and I've been there now for 9 years, I guess it is. And one of the things I think what I find is that you do really have the ability to help people and have an impact on people's lives. You don't always succeed in everything you want to do, but there are definitely moments, and as you gain experience and you learn how the system works and how you get bills through, as we talked about earlier, you become better at it and you can actually help more people. So it's something that I find very rewarding. It's something I've enjoyed doing.
When you first started on the local level here in Stamford, had you thoughts of going to the state?
I mean, I can't say that I had a laid out plan as far as what I was going to do, and if I did, probably things have changed at times. I mean, when I was in the got on the Board of Representatives, my state rep was Maura Lyons, who was also the Speaker of the House at the time, and she had been serving there for a period of time and with great distinction. And so I didn't know if that would open up or anything like that. It wasn't really something that I had planned. But as the opportunities developed, I mean, I think one of the things is if you're involved And if you're focusing on the job that you have at the time, other opportunities will arise. And if you just look at it that way, you can find that you can do things that are worthwhile.
Senator Leone, you are one who went from one house over to the other along the way. How did you get started, and what got you going in either house, and why did you decide to shift?
I had sort of an interesting way of getting to where I'm at now. When I finished high school, much like some of you folks who are about to do, my options, I wasn't really looking towards college at the time, so I joined the service and I served in the U.S. Air Force for 6 years. And when I came back to Stamford, I went out like everybody else, looking for a job and, trying to get ready to create a career and a future and possibly a family, which is exactly what I did. And I started working for one of the Fortune 500 companies locally. But then eventually I realized I wanted to do more than just have a career. And I started to get involved locally to see what was going on in my hometown in Stamford. And instead of complaining, because we all sometimes complain about what's going on and I don't like how things are happening, you don't have a right to complain if you don't get involved. And so I kind of took that to heart, and I started working with some of the local folks and got to know Jerry and eventually got to know Scott. And that's how I started getting involved into the local politics. But it was really a fortuitous moment. My predecessor in the House, Ann McDonald, she was serving for over 10 years in the legislature, but she fell ill. And so she had to step down, and that created a vacuum. And it was a good opportunity of being at the right place at the right time. In the sense what Jerry just said, if you work hard and put yourself in a position to play, when an opportunity presents itself, you can then jump in, and that's exactly what I did. I jumped into the position, worked very hard to run for an open seat. It was a very tight, contested race. I only won by a few points, percentage-wise. And from there, I was able to be in the House of Representatives for a solid 8 years. And then when the opening for the Senate came up, it was the same sort of thing. My predecessor, Andrew McDonald, actually was Ann McDonald's son. He got promoted to work in the governor's administration. So that created another vacuum. Same situation, being at the right place at the right time, having had the skills to say that I could do the job, and I was able to run another race that was contested, and I was fortunate enough to win, and I've been there ever since. So bottom line, just working towards what it is you want to do, putting yourself in a position to play, and when the opportunity presents itself, you can really take advantage of it.
Very good. Student number 2, we've got a question over here. Would you give us your name and your class and your question, please?
Hi, I'm Ryan Krishnan. I'm also a sophomore. I just wanted to know, what are some of the most important bills that you've been a part of developing and passing?
Senator Leone, you want to
Sure.
say the most important for you?
Well, there's several, depending on the different committees, and I've been there for a number of years now. One that I'm proud of is we created a film and entertainment tax incentive a few years ago. That was the creation of bringing the film and entertainment industry to the state of Connecticut when there was none, and this was when the economy was pretty depressed. As a result, that has brought a lot of films to the state of Connecticut, but more importantly, eventually started bringing the industry to Connecticut where they could start producing here in the state. And that's brought in Chelsea Piers, it brought in NBC Studios, it allowed other venues to come to town. So that, from an economic development perspective, I was very proud of that. I'm the chairman of the Veterans Committee, so we passed numerous legislation to help our veterans when they return home. One that I was proud of is any veteran that might be killed in action, their children and their spouse would have free state tuition so that they're not left out in the cold, because many times that's the only breadwinner. So that one is very dear to my heart. And just recently we passed legislation that every community will have a veteran representative, so that if a veteran does need assistance, they can go to their local town hall. So that's one. And I'll give you a third example. I'm now chairman of the Banks Committee, and just last session we passed legislation for mortgage foreclosure, a mediation process. So people that were potentially losing their homes or couldn't afford to make the payments. We wanted them to be able to readjust their mortgages, but sometimes the banks weren't willing to work for them. So we created a mediation process where they can go to the courts and actually hammer out a deal. We have about a 60% track record of people staying in their homes. And for the remaining percentage that don't, those are the ones that shouldn't have been there in the first place. So we made it easier for the decisions to get made so that both parties can come to a resolution. So those are just 3 quick ones, and there's a whole host of others that we've worked simultaneously together on.
Let's hand the baton to Senator Frantz.
A lot of the bills that I'm the most proud of are probably some of the most boring bills, and they probably aren't going to be too sexy to talk about here today. They're mainly economic development bills. It has to do with job retraining, has to do with providing incentives for companies to hire more people, low interest loans. There are a whole variety of bills like that that I'm not going to spend any time on, but I'm particularly proud of because I'm the ranking member of the Commerce Committee that generates these bills. And they've made a big difference, I think, over the last 4 or 5 years in the state of Connecticut in terms of attracting businesses to the state of Connecticut and protecting the companies that are here from leaving or shedding their jobs. And if you don't have a good economy, then obviously the opportunities don't exist for people, and then you start asking for all kinds of trouble. And so one of the reasons I'm up there in the first place, in addition to just being a great way to perform public service and help individuals or collectively the constituents that we all have as our voters and supporters, is to create these wonderful economic opportunities and job opportunities for people. Other specific bills that I'm proud of along the same lines: Bradley International Airport was a state agency, in essence, run by the Department of Transportation. And now, because of a bill that I authored going back now about 9 years and tried for 7 of those last 9 years to get it passed, finally with the new governor coming in, they did pass this bill in their infinite wisdom, finally. And it now has a private sector board of directors that essentially controls a government asset, which is unusual, but it's the only way to run an airport like a business. It makes major contributions to economic development, and that's one that I worked long hours on and many years on, and finally got that passed. There are a bunch of other environmental bills having to do with Long Island Sound, keeping it clean, that I'm particularly proud of. And the texting bill that we were talking about before, and also a school bus safety bill, which allows school bus operators to put cameras on the sides of a bus so that if someone runs through that protected area when the boom goes out, the stop signs go out, they'll have it on tape and they will get fined for it. So,
Senator Frantz, thank you very much. Representative Fox.
As co-chair of Judiciary, we definitely get involved in a lot of interesting bills, and they tend to be the ones that sometimes do get some headlines. They're the ones that deal with crimes. They deal with punishments that are associated with those crimes. Recently, we've done some work with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, dealing with ignition interlock devices and the use of those for those who are arrested for drunk driving. We've dealt with some sexual assault for those people who have the inability to give consent. What was happening is that there was a loophole in the law where people who may have had certain levels of the ability to consent, essentially, those who were disabled, and they were being taken advantage of, and we were able to do something that will hopefully help them. Domestic violence is an issue that I've been involved in. It's something that trying to find ways not only to increase penalties, but that's not the only thing. It's also making sure that people are aware of where they can go for help, what they can do to prevent it from happening in the first place. And it's things like that we've worked on in the Judiciary Committee. I mean, there's a number of bills, a number of laws. Recently we did one just last year where a Stamford police officer was injured and almost died when he was in pursuit of a person who had a warrant out for his arrest. And what happened is, because it was a foot chase as opposed to a motor vehicle chase, the penalty was much less. And what we did, and I thank my colleagues here for supporting it, is that we increased the penalty for those who engage in a chase and cause a serious injury to a police officer. So that's something we were able to do just in the last year as well.
Our guests have all been involved in so many other bills. We obviously only have time to hit the top of the iceberg. We want to thank you all for being with us. We've got to take a quick break here. But we want to thank our hosts here from Stamford High School for allowing us to Meet the Leaders to Stamford High School, and you have the questioners. We've got lots more questions coming up from the students in just a couple of moments. My name is David Smith. This is Meet the Leaders on the road at Stamford High School in Stamford, strangely enough, with Senator Carlo Leone, Senator Scott Frantz, and Representative Jerry Fox. Got to take a break here, but we'll be back with more in just a moment. Thank you.
Getting closer to nature can get you closer to your family. Go to discovertheforest.org.
Clean kitchen surfaces, utensils, and hands with soapy water. 1 in 6 Americans will get sick from food poisoning this year. Keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.
And we're back on Meet the Leaders here at Stamford High School. I'm David Smith. Good to have you along with us and to be with our guests, the juniors and seniors here at Stamford High School, and our special guests, Senator Carlo Leone, Senator Scott Frantz, and Representative Jerry Fox. And we have got another questioner here, and if you would identify yourself and your class.
Hi, my name is Yolanda Wright. I'm also a sophomore. My question to you guys is, what do you believe the biggest issues are in Connecticut? How would you solve them, and what are your plans for 2014?
These are just quick answers that you're going to have here. We're going to have to compress these just a little bit for time's sake, but Senator Leone.
Well, usually the big...
Pick one big issue and a quick fix if there is such a thing.
Well, I'll mention two, but they're related: budget and jobs. They're the biggest economic driver of the state, and our job is to make sure that we improve both scenarios.
The business friendliness or lack thereof of the state of Connecticut, I think, is something that we need to work on. The business environment is crucial for creating jobs for all of you and for every other person that's capable of working in the state of Connecticut. And we're laser focused on that to make it happen by reducing regulations, hopefully reducing taxes one of these days, and making ourselves more competitive.
And Representative Fox.
We've been told we need to shorten our answers, and we're doing a good job of that here. I agree with the jobs, the economy, and all of that are extremely important. And I would also add transportation and transportation infrastructure. We need to continue to make it possible for people to get around, because they need to be able to get to work in a manner that's efficient and then could allow them to do their jobs.
Very good. Our next questioner, please.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Zhang, and I'm also a sophomore. My question is, what plans do you have to further improve the education in Connecticut?
Educational plans. Representative Fox.
Well, we've tried in recent years, Governor Malloy has initiated a number of education reforms. I know we're in the process now of implementing Common Core, which I know is a real challenge for teachers throughout the state, and I hear it from them frequently. However, I think it's also something that they are looking to do, because what they're trying to do is just find out where we stand, find out how we can improve, and what we can do going forward.
The education bill that was passed 2 years ago is a good one. It was a lot smaller and less comprehensive than I would have liked to have seen it. I think the governor did a real good job of writing that bill. It got whittled down, as you would expect. I'd love to see not only more resources put into education, but I'd like to see some of the great examples of great success stories in Connecticut, mainly in the charter school system, in the real hard areas, urban areas, where it's difficult to teach kids and get kids to actually go to school and get much out of it. Take some of those lessons and use them in the other parts of the public school system.
Senator Leone.
I think making sure that you know, they're all working towards common goals and standards, and the Common Core is a result of that was collectively put together by numerous states. The federal government has attached dollars towards working towards those standards, and making sure that the schools and educators and parents and the community are held accountable for those successes, and for any shortfalls that we work as a unit, as a group to make the improvements. So it's bringing awareness to the education model that you know, sometimes has been fractured at multiple local levels, and that sometimes has created hardships.
Okay. Our next questioner.
My name is Brendan George. I'm a senior here, and you touched on this just a moment ago, but do you agree with the national standards of Common Core on a state level, and in what way do you feel it affects students here?
Sure. The Common Core, you know, it's been controversial because it's creating national standards, meaning that someone from North Carolina being taught in school could move to Connecticut and pick up without having to be left behind or having to play catch up. So from that perspective, the standards are a good thing. But because it's so widespread and so new, there's still a lot of questions that remain to be answered in the implementation. And that's where local control comes into play, that the local control or the local minds can sometimes be best in position to make the right decision for that particular community. So the question becomes, how do you balance those two directives? That remains to be seen, but I believe that having those standards in place does set a minimum bar that we can only improve upon. If you fall below that bar, then what that means is kids such as yourself might not be in a position to play when you move on towards college and having the best education possible. Because when you go out there to compete, you're competing not just amongst your peers from your state or competing against peers from other states, you're competing against your peers globally. And so our job is to make sure that we give you the best tools to do that. The Common Core is our attempt to make that happen.
Senator Frantz.
It's a little bit like the health care bill. Remember Nancy Pelosi said, you know, we're going to have to pass this to figure out what's in it. Until Common Core is implemented, and it will be implemented and fully executed throughout the land at some point, we won't really know what it means. My initial reaction is I don't like the idea necessarily of it. Standards are good, but you're also going to be holding back a lot of kids who could be achieving superior results potentially as a result of this. It's an unknown in terms of what the cost structure is. I mean, already in Connecticut, we've spent or will have spent by the end of the next quarter probably $45–50 million just trying to bring the IT, information technology capabilities up to the point where you can actually track the Common Core principles.
And Representative Fox.
I understand the rationale behind wanting to be able to measure where we are and where we're going in the future, and that is very important. We also have to be very considerate of the concern that we are going to lose out on other educational opportunities because of the focus on just implementing this. And I know this year is a challenging year, as I said earlier, because there's still a lot of people are asking questions. It's a lot of the unknown as they go forward, and I think it's something we do need to watch carefully.
Thank you very much. Next questioner, please.
Hi, I'm Brian Powers. I'm a senior here, and I wanted to know how much of the state's tax dollars are being spent on public education, and how has this money been put to use in the city of Stamford?
Okay, Brian. Public education. Representative Fox, how much of the state's resources are spent on public education?
$4 billion, I believe, out of a $18 billion or $19 billion
$4 billion.
Yeah, so it's a significant amount of money that is going into education throughout the state. As far as here in Stamford, I mean, we've always been challenged with the ECS formula. I do think we've made some progress in the last couple of years, and we're also trying to get other avenues of funding, such as building schools. I mean, AITE was a state-built school. The new Rogers International is a state-built school. So sometimes what we do is, if the formula doesn't work for us, we try to find other avenues by which we can increase state benefits for the city of Stamford.
The local budget is about $28 million, and it has not grown very much at all. And as Representative Fox alluded to a second ago, the education cost sharing formula is plainly not fair for the city of Stamford. like all formulas, they're really not going to have much basis in reality unless they are adjusted constantly, to reflect current circumstances. And we basically all agree that unless we launch a lawsuit, that the amount of money and resources that come to Stamford are not going to be at a fair level. So it's been talked about before. Hopefully we can come to a resolution before having to go to the courts to make sure that Stamford gets more resources.
Senator Leone.
We spend a lot of time on education issues, and rightly so. And locally, I think school budget's usually around 60% of most local municipalities. And as you mentioned, $4 billion towards education is quite a sum of money. But dollars are not always the answer, and sometimes those can be squandered. So our job is to make sure that we're getting as much as we possibly can. Senator Frantz rightly mentioned that we haven't always received what we should be receiving. And our job is to fight for that, and sometimes that's a tough battle coming from a part of the state that does well compared to others. So our success can sometimes hamper us in that regard. But we are very committed towards getting as much as possible and always working to invest in education, because that is the key to the future for every person here. Anyone who has an education has opportunities in life, and those that don't get it are the ones that are left behind.
How is that ECS formula derived?
It was based on the grand list, but we just made the change so that it'd be a little bit more comparable, which actually elevated our ability to get more dollars to Stamford. But that's still relatively new. The formula constantly is being adjusted, and sometimes we've been on the losing end of that adjustment. So our job is to fight for that.
It's ongoing. Okay, next questioner, please.
Hello, my name is Frank Pisano, and my question has to do with the Affordable Care Act. How has Connecticut's exchanges been performing with that?
Okay, Senator Frantz.
They will tell you that it's the best in the country of all the 50 states, and that very well could be the case in terms of the number of enrollees. I know for a fact, unfortunately, there have been some problems with it in terms of getting the accurate information to people prior to them signing up. So a lot of people signed up for a plan that may be different, maybe slightly, maybe substantially different than what they were told they were going to be getting. That'll get resolved over the course of time, hopefully. They've signed up about 35,000 people so far, which I believe makes us one of the 2 or 3 states that have exceeded the goals for enrollment at this particular point in the cycle.
Representative Fox.
I mean, it's something that Connecticut has been laying the groundwork for a couple of years now, and or even longer, and it's something that we were ready to implement, which is why I think our statistics are showing that we're one of the top states, if not the top state, in terms of how it's working.
Jump to another questioner if we could. Hello there, your name and what class are you in?
Hello, my name is Shahern Philemon, and I'm a senior here, and my question was, what challenges does Connecticut face in regards to the current debate over immigration reform, and how has federal policy or lack thereof affected our state?
Representative Fox, you want to start on that one?
Sure. I mean, we face the same challenges as everybody else. Other states, all states face immigration concerns. We have attempted to find ways that we can do legally here in Connecticut. I mean, I think you're all familiar with the fact that federal law preempts state law, meaning that the state can't enact a law that would overturn the federal law. So we are somewhat reliant upon them. But what we've done is tried to find ways of which we can make it better for those who are immigrants in our communities, and make it so that they are more a part of our process here in our government.
Senator Frantz.
I think we'll have to remember that this country was founded and is still very much based on immigration, legal immigration. It's a great country, I would argue the best country in the history of mankind in the world, based on the amount of assistance they've given to the rest of the world, not only monetarily, but in all other senses of the word, and resources too. So I think we have to get this right. We've got to have an orderly system of immigration. It is a federal issue. They've got to get it together down in Washington, D.C. They may just do that this session.
Anything we can do here?
In the state?
Yeah.
Not really, because
they're go through the Fed.
That's correct. They've got to make it clear what our immigration policy is, and in the meantime, we have to respect those laws.
Hate to cut you short, Senator Leone, quickly, if you would.
I believe the states do have a role to play. You know, because the feds don't act, they're afraid to act for the political reasons. The states then have the responsibility and the capability to pass their own laws on how they see immigration in their state. You know, we in Connecticut, we actually passed our version of the DREAM Act, where immigrants can go to the state schools and get their education, so that they can continue their career.
Okay, thank you, Senator. I'm sorry again. We're running short on time. One
Sure.
more question, please.
Hi, my name is Tyler Noga, and I was just wondering, as politicians, what are your opinions on term limits and how they affect the federal or how they would affect the federal and the state
Okay,
governments?
quickly on term limits, Senator Leone.
I'm against the term limits. I think voting and elections are term limits in and of themselves.
I'm in favor of them. I'd be the first to adhere to a new system.
I would tend to lean towards Senator Leone's explanation. I would say, you know, elections can implement their own term limits.
Okay, going forward, in another month, they're going to be in action up at Hartford again. First thing you'd like to see implemented in this next term, Senator Leone?
Well, I chair 2 committees, so I'll be focusing on those. We're preparing.
One thing?
A veterans implementation of some funding for the services.
Okay, upcoming session.
The bill, the budget bill.
The budget bill.
Super critical that we get this right and we don't spend more money than we have. Otherwise, your futures are not as bright as they could be.
And that will start
February.
Immediately when you get there?
Well, it's starting even before session starts.
Okay, so your caucuses are already working out plans and so forth on how to deal with that.
That's correct.
reality.
And Finance Committee and Bond Commission, et cetera, is continuing to meet.
Representative Fox.
And actually, this is a budget session. It is the most important thing that we deal with this session. The controller recently came out with a projected surplus. We want to make sure that continues. That was positive news, and we look forward to hopefully that going forward.
Too many times the fiscal information that comes out is so far after the fact that you find yourself in a hole that you didn't know you were getting into. And is there any way to update, speed the information so that you can counter whatever pitfalls we might be in the midst of that we're not even aware of?
Well, we do a pretty good job. We have 3 separate entities. You have the legislature, you have the governor's administration, and then you have a nonpartisanship organization that all provides their outlook on the financial future of Connecticut. Many times they agree. There's a few times where there's an interpretation that is different, and that's what is presented to us on the Finance Committee and on the Appropriations Committee, and our job is to try and pick the best options available.
Scott Frantz.
There's really no way to speed it up, but I would caution everybody to be very careful about the numbers that you see. Yes, they're forecasting a surplus for the year, but we've been borrowing a lot of money too.
Representative Fox.
One of the things I think it's important for you to know here is that we do have nonpartisan staff. That means their job is simply, they're not Democrats, Republicans, their job is to supply us with information, whether it be on laws as well as budgetary information. And we do rely upon that, and it's the same information that everybody gets from the nonpartisan staff.
So it all comes from the unaffiliated bipartisan group into you all, and then you all, each of your parties sorts it out, and we see what the results are eventually.
It's a mixed bag, but we do work hard to work together.
Well, I'll tell you what, we want to wish you all the best. Want to thank our students here at Stamford High School and the high school administration for welcoming Meet the Leaders to your hallowed halls here. Beautiful facility that it is. Great thoughts and great questions that you all had for our guests. And most of all, I'd like to thank our senators and representative for taking time out of incredible schedules that they maintain and trying to keep their lives together and serving all of us throughout the state of Connecticut, in particular in the Stamford region for our guest today.
Thank you.
Senator Carlo Leone, Senator Scott Frantz, and Representative Jerry Fox.
Thank you.
They will be up on the Merritt Parkway in a matter of a month, battling the traffic to get up to Hartford to serve all of us. And as we indicated earlier, maintain jobs and family life and so forth. But that service to all of us in the community is invaluable, and we want to thank you very much for that going forward on both sides of the aisles. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
And that's going to do it for this edition of Meet the Leaders. It is a pleasure to escape the studios to get down to visit with some of you, the future of the state of Connecticut here, and always a pleasure to be with you too on Meet the Leaders. I'm David Smith, and we will look for you next time.